There was once someone who had been living in a world that seemed to grow darker with each passing day. Not darker in the sense of actual light. The street lamps still glowed, the screen still flickered, the fluorescent bulbs still hummed their harsh tune. But darker in the way that hope can dim when life becomes an endless series of obligations without joy, tasks without purpose, days without wonder. The spark that had once made everything seem possible had gradually faded until even the simplest pleasures felt muted and gray. One evening, while walking aimlessly through the old quarter of the city, trying to escape the suffocating routine of daily life, this person noticed something unusual happening in a small park tucked between ancient buildings. People were gathering in the growing dusk, each person carrying what appeared to be a paper lantern that glowed softly from within. There was something mysterious and beautiful about the scene. Dozens of gentle lights moving slowly through the twilight like earthbound stars, creating an atmosphere of quiet magic that seemed to exist outside the normal flow of time. Curiosity overcame shyness, and moving closer revealed that this was some kind of lantern festival, not the loud, commercial kind with vendors and crowds, but something more intimate and spiritual. An elderly woman with kind eyes noticed the newcomer watching from the edge of the gathering and approached with a warm smile. Without saying a word, she pressed a paper lantern into uncertain hands, a simple creation of rice paper and bamboo that weighed almost nothing but seemed to pulse with gentle warmth from the small candle flickering inside. The lantern was beautiful in its simplicity, glowing like a captured piece of moonlight. Looking around, it became clear that each person's lantern was slightly different. Some were decorated with delicate paintings of birds or flowers. Others bore written wishes in various languages, and still others were left completely plain, their beauty lying entirely in the pure, soft light they cast into the gathering darkness. The diversity was stunning, but what united them all was the gentle radiance that seemed to emanate not just from the candles, but from the faces of the people carrying them. As the last light faded from the western sky, the gathering began to move slowly toward a small pond at the center of the park. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the first stars that were beginning to appear overhead, and creating the illusion of a mirror that stretched infinitely upward and downward. Around the pond's edge, someone had placed flat stones to create a natural pathway, and hanging from tree branches were strings of tiny lights that twinkled like captured fireflies. One by one, people began to place their lanterns carefully onto the water's surface. Each lantern floated perfectly, the paper base somehow designed to rest on the water without sinking, the candle inside continuing to burn steadily despite the gentle evening breeze. As more lanterns joined the first one, the pond began to transform into something magical, a floating constellation that seemed to contain all the warmth and hope and dreams of everyone present. The silence that fell over the gathering was not empty but full, pregnant with wishes unspoken, dreams held close to the heart, and a shared sense of participating in something larger than individual experience. Each floating lantern seemed to carry with it the prayers and hopes of its creator, bobbing gently on the dark water like small boats, carrying precious cargo to some distant shore where all dreams come true. Standing at the pond's edge, watching these dozens of lights dance on the water's surface, something began to shift in the darkness that had settled over recent months. The lanterns were so simple, just paper and wax and flame, yet their combined effect was breathtakingly beautiful. They proved that light doesn't have to be harsh or artificial to push back the darkness. Sometimes the gentlest glow is the most powerful, especially when it's shared with others who also carry light. As the evening progressed, more people arrived, each adding their own lantern to the growing constellation on the water. Children came with lanterns decorated in bright colors, their faces glowing with excitement as they watched their creations join the floating community. Couples arrived together, placing their lanterns side by side and watching them drift together across the dark water. Elderly people came alone, but seemed less lonely, as their solitary lights joined the larger gathering, becoming part of something beautiful and communal. The pond itself seemed transformed by the presence of so many gentle lights. What had appeared during the day as an ordinary city water feature now looked like a portal to some other realm where beauty and peace were the natural order of things. The reflection of the floating lanterns in the still water created the illusion that there were twice as many lights, a mirror world below the surface where dreams and reality merged in perfect harmony. A gentle breeze began to move across the water, causing the lanterns to drift slowly around the pond in a graceful dance. None of them moved quickly or frantically. Instead, they bobbed and swayed with the calm dignity of ships embarking on a sacred journey. Some clustered together in small groups, others preferred to sail alone, but all of them remained part of the larger pattern that was constantly shifting yet somehow always perfectly balanced. As the night deepened, the stars overhead grew brighter, and the floating lanterns below seemed to answer their celestial counterparts with their own steady glow. The boundary between earth and sky began to blur, creating the sensation of floating in space surrounded by lights above and below, held suspended in a universe where beauty was the fundamental law and peace was the natural state of being. Conversations around the pond's edge were conducted in whispers as if everyone understood intuitively that this was a sacred space where loud voices would shatter the delicate magic being created. People shared stories about what their lantern represented. Some were floating in memory of loved ones who had passed away. Others carried wishes for healing or success or love. Many simply represented hope. Hope that tomorrow might be brighter, that kindness still existed in the world, that beauty could still surprise and delight even in the midst of ordinary life. The most remarkable thing about the evening was how it seemed to exist outside of normal time. Hours passed without being noticed, marked only by the gradual progression of stars across the sky and the slow dance of lanterns across the water. There was no schedule to keep, no agenda to follow, no productivity to maintain. Just the simple pleasure of being present in a moment of collective beauty. As the evening began to draw to a close, the lanterns gradually burned down until their light grew dim and finally went out, one by one. But rather than being sad, this felt like a natural completion. Each light had shared its glow for exactly as long as it was meant to, contributing to the magic while it could, then gracefully returning to darkness so that new lights could take their place. The pond returned to its ordinary appearance, but the memory of what it had become remained vivid and transforming. Walking home through streets that no longer seemed quite so gray, carrying the memory of floating lights and shared silence, it became clear that something fundamental had shifted. The darkness that had felt so overwhelming just a few hours earlier now seemed less solid, more temporary. The evening had provided a reminder that light exists everywhere, in the kindness of strangers who share lanterns with newcomers, in the simple beauty of flame reflected on water, in the collective human impulse to create something beautiful together, even in the midst of an ordinary city park. The Lantern Festival had lasted only a few hours, but its effects would ripple outward for much longer. Every time the memory of those floating lights returned, and it would return often, especially during difficult moments, it would bring with it the knowledge that beauty is always possible, unity is always available, and even the smallest light, when shared with others, can transform darkness into something magical and full of hope.